The rich are opposed to anything that would settle and improve things in this country or try to make it something more than cow pasture for Eastern speculators. They advance the idea that poor people have nothing to say in the affairs of this country. We're going to shoot the sons of bitches, and even the army won't save them. I'm Eddie Webb.
And I'm Chris Spivey.
Today we're going to talk about the woke-ass film Heaven's Gate. It's not that woke ass. Hi, I'm Eddie Webb, and we're going to talk about this movie that I knew nothing about a week ago, and now I think I know maybe too much about now.
I think we should probably start, though, to give a point of reference about which version of the film you saw, because I think there's like 4, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there are some Blade Runner levels of different cuts of this movie. So after we recorded last episode, Chris was like, hey, so we should watch the director's cut, which is not streaming anywhere in the UK. It is primarily on the Criterion Collection, as I understand it. And there are a couple of services in the US that stream that version, but not in the UK. So I ended up watching 1980 theatrical release, which is available here. And Chris is going to watch 2012 director's cut, which is like an hour's difference between the two. So
epically long. As a side note of interest, for anyone that does want to go and see this, you cannot find it on the Criterion Collection's channel or app. I know because I'm a member and it's not there. In fact, I watch it on the MGM app with my 7-day free trial.
Right. Okay. And we'll go into why that is in a second. But for point of house cleaning, normally, we talked before, like we'll go onto Wikipedia or other sites to kind of get a plot summary and then rewrite that as we watch the film to better align with me. There was already a plot summary in the document when I approached the film, which I think Chris, you put there because somebody else put it there. You have other questions.
I think I pulled it from Wikipedia. I was doing some preamble work to help us along for a little bit,
which I appreciate. But it is, I believe, referencing the 2012 version. So occasionally there's going to be things I'm going to say that I didn't actually see. So occasionally be like, so Chris, what happened in this chunk? Because I didn't see that part. And I have opinions about what they did to the movie. But
one of the things I do want to say about the cuts, though, is from my understanding of the cuts, and you could probably go into more detail. Because, all right, this is a movie that was on my list to watch. I did not watch this movie for Haunted West, so I do not have a big point of reference for it. So this is something that we're both seeing for the first time. I think this is the only movie possibly in this whole run that is doing that.
Okay, well then.
And I actively chose not to tell you that until we're on air.
Interesting. So one thing that
to my point, then you can jump into it, is that I think but the primary difference between the 2.5 hour version, like the 3 hour and fucking 40-minute version I watched, is that supposedly most of the same scenes are there. I think some of them are cut, but they're primarily just shortened.
There are some scenes that are genuinely missing, but yes, I think that's largely true. But there's a lot of context as to why, and also how this film is notorious for all of the wrong reasons, and it's fascinating. So I kind of try to go as fast as possible, but it's a wild ride.
I think the history of this movie is probably more detailed and important than the actual movie itself. No offense if anyone that loves this movie.
On some level, yes. There's a lot about this movie to talk about, don't get me wrong, but the background is much more interesting. So director's Michael Cimino, and he was primarily known for The Deer Hunter, which was a critical success in the late 70s. At this point in cinematic history, in Hollywood history, we talked a little bit about this, like the rise of people who became directors who became more famous than the leads for the movies, right? There was this kind of shift towards a director-driven industry. Directors kind of drove what movies got greenlit and how they got written. And ultimately, directors started to get signed sight unseen.
Yeah.
A lot of Spielberg's early movies were kind of signed just because he was Spielberg. That still kind of happens, but like it was more so. And this movie single-handedly changed all of that.
Well, is single-handedly the right word?
Okay, let me rephrase that. This movie is blamed for a lot of that shift.
I think I don't push back too much. I think it heavily influenced that, but I think there are probably other factors too, though.
Basically, it's weird. Like, this is most we have to talk about the actual movie industry, talk about this movie, but as I understand it, in recent years, has been since discovered that there was actually kind of a shift to studios wanting to do this anyway. So this movie became, rightly or wrongly, and we'll talk about that throughout the course of the episode, the cause celeb for that shift. It was unironically named the worst movie of all time by a couple of different critics. And to jump to the ends of the story real quick, the movie premiered in November 1980, received significant critical backlash. United Arts pulled it from theaters, re-released in 81, and an even shorter version, which remained a financial failure. It only earned $3.5 million of its $44 million budget. So,
which part of this do you want to go into first? There's a lot. You gave away like some of the reception of it, but there's still a whole that happened after that and before.
Yeah. Oh. I wanted to give the context for why it could have been called the worst film of all time before I go back to some of the background stuff, right?
Okay. Well, then I think a good preference point for folks would be like they know that it costs around $44 million to make in the end. What was the initial budget Cimino was given?
$10 million. That's one of the big problems. He literally quadrupled the budget. And in fairness to the movie, you can see where the money went, right? Like, a lot of that money did end up on screen. But it was massively over budget. So I actually have a whole subnote of notes called "Hold On to Your Butts" about this whole thing.
I think we should do like all the background history for this movie because it is.
Right, we will. So to go back to how this movie came about is Cimino quickly leveraged his success on The Deer Hunter to work on his next film, which was going to be Heaven's Gate. He actually pushed the studios to add his name as a producer credit to The Deer Hunter like weeks before it went to theaters. Okay, so let me take it back. Sometimes movies, particularly in the 70s and 80s, I think they still do it these days, I'm not sure, will show in waves. There'll be a certain set of theaters they'll release to, and then there's a lower range, quote unquote, budget theaters that will then fall down to in a second wave. And sometimes the bigger theaters will also re-show the movie several months later as a encore showing. He had his credits added to those later showings as a producer. Then immediately went to UA and said, "Look, I'm a producer. Give me this movie." And because originally he was in initial talks with them as a director, but he then changed that talking to being a director producer so he could manage his own money. Right. So already some red flags.
All right. So we mentioned Deer Hunter, but he also had that Clint Eastwood movie too, like Thunder and Lightfoot or something that was also a super success for this. So that's why he had Clint Eastwood on his side, who was like had a bunch of clout.
Sure, but Deer Hunter was like the big money maker for studios.
Yeah, the script for this Heaven's Gate thing, there was something I think he'd been peddling around since like 1970. It was called the Johnson County War.
Oh, okay. I should know that one.
Because he, if I remember right, he's a writer and director of this thing. And so he wrote it and he tried to get it happen, and like John Wayne turned it down and all this other stuff. And so it languished. And they used all this clout from this to make it a thing.
To make the film he really wanted to make, right? This was like his pet project. And there's a lot of warning signs for that. But like he's also, especially based on what you were just telling me, he's learned how to game the system over his career up to this point. To go back to Deer Hunter for a second, he actually took the opening of the film for Deer Hunter, compressed it down to about 3 or 4 pages, and the studio budgeted off of that and said, "Yeah, sure, that looks great." Then he pulls out his actual script, which is much longer, shot that instead, but then they were already in production, and so studio couldn't stop the train, right? So that tactic went into making Heaven's Gate, which was I'm gonna show you a version of script that looks viable, $10 million on paper, and then I'm gonna shoot the $44 million version over here.
All right, I'm curious. Have you seen Deer Hunter?
No, I haven't. Oh, let me rephrase that. I have, but it's been like since the 80s since I've seen it.
I've never seen it. What is it about?
A guy who,
if you remember,
I remember very little of it.
All I know is that Christopher Walken's in it somewhere,
right? Which I'll get into because as I understand it, Semino's part of the reason why Walken became such a big star.
Yeah.
But Christopher Walken here is very different from Christopher Walken we know now.
Because he's not doing that affected voice that we get, that we can become iconically known for.
Yes, because Christopher Walken at some point in his career recognized that self-parody was a viable way to maintain his career. He's not there yet. So he's not actually into self-parody. So it's a bit disconcerting to watch him and go, "Oh yeah, it's Christopher Walken. He's not talking anything like I'm used to Christopher Walken talking." Because you're expecting him to talk like this, and he doesn't.
I think there's more of a Kirk than a Walken, but we could quibble or quab.
I mean, they're both add up to self-parody, right? So, here are some examples of things he did while filming the movie. There's a tree that they danced around in the beginning of the movie. He felt he needed a tree from America. He was filming in England. So they chopped a tree down, disassembled it to thousands of pieces, shipped it to England, and reassembled the tree. Right?
Of course. Why not?
One of the battles, he felt like the grass wasn't green enough on screen. So he had an entire irrigation system installed on the battlefield to make sure that the grass was the maximum green.
Eddie, you're making these things sound like they're outrageous, and they're not what other directors would do. This feels very Stanley Kubrick to me, I would say.
Okay, so here we go. When he had the town set built, he felt that the street needed to be 6 feet wider. He said, tear the whole thing down and rebuild it. The set designer said, can't we just move one side 6 feet? Like, no, it has to be 3 feet on each side, separately have to move out, tear the whole thing down and start again. Does that sound reasonable?
Well, it's the fact that he had an entire town built, like literally a whole town constructed.
Yes.
That is like the first step of it. But then to have it torn down to move it 3 feet apart for the sunset. There's also a lot of bits about him waiting for like the golden hour to some extent, frequently for filming. And the golden hour happens for like maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day, and like that's all you get.
Right. It was so bad that one of the producers joked that by day 5 of shooting, they were 6 days behind schedule. So, but his attention to detail and obsessive paranoia extended beyond that. He had a strict no media policy on it, which is funny because at the time it was seen as heavy-handed. Today, that's a pretty common thing. Of course, you don't have media. The amount of secrecy around films these days, it's not weird to see that. But in 1979, when this was shooting, that was actually a very bizarre thing to not have any media at all around your shooting.
Well, then it was less about spoilers, though. Today, it's all about
Right.
spoiler culture and who gets the
Right.
most clicks, so they make the most money, so that becomes an ongoing thing.
Right. Whereas at this time, there was a much more integrated relationship between movie criticism and the studios. And so a lot of times critics would get special benefits to get backstage and whatnot and talk to people because in the hopes that the critic would then review the film more favorably.
Yeah.
Um, so a lot of the negativity around how the film was shot and the conditions behind set came from one specific reporter, Les Gabay. And he actually got himself hired as an extra because there's so many goddamn extras. At one point in time, they couldn't actually keep track of who was actually hired to be an extra or not. So he just got himself added because they couldn't manage the overhead of how many extras they had. And he's the one who wrote an expose on Cimino and how he handled things on the set. And so he wrote about, and over the years, how much of this is true or not has been thrown into question. So I'm just going to say this is what he wrote about, and then we can go from there. He said that extras were injured to an unreasonable amount, which is a whole phrase in and of itself. During filming, there was a lot of animal abuse on the set, apparently, according to this. He said that Cimino was a thoughtless spender, didn't really know what he was after. He frequently changed his minds and caused many, many retakes of the very same shot. And a lot of the critical appraisal of the film was skewed by Gabay's report. Which leads to kind of an interesting... we're now at a stage where the criticism of these films are getting to an era that you and I are lived memory. So we're getting to kind of a weird place because how much of the film's negative reception was based on is genuinely a bad film, and how much of it was because it was a reason for this reporter to build on things, and also maybe the studios were kind of encouraging this negative perception of auteur directors. How much of it is actually fairly leveraged against the film versus how much of this was just political, frankly. So it's an interesting place.
I think there was an autobiography of a different author who came out around 2012 about his life, and part of it talks about the movie here and how a lot of the stuff, like criticisms you're saying, was inaccurate to some extent,
right?
And how a lot of the cast, like the actors, loved working with Cimino because Cimino was like reinforced him or like gave them support. For instance, I think it was Isabella, the French actress who's the lead in this, was someone that he actively chose to hire for this movie that the studio didn't want. They wanted like an American named actress, and he was like, no. And he did. He like wheeled and dealed, or as I would say from what we've seen, tricked them into hiring this actress until it was too late. And like I think one of the reporters from an article that I'd read somewhere said that they thought that she was finger quotes from their article, potato faced and all this other stuff to like this beautiful French woman because they wanted an American name actress instead of her. And instead, Cimino got her hired and did all the stuff that he wanted here on the script, on the screen.
Right. So we have this kind of narrative where now we can look back and go, there aren't really any good guys in this narrative, right? Like, was Cimino an obsessive director who absolutely demanded perfection and required it for his films to be considered to be successful by his standards? Yes, that's just unambiguously true. After this movie, he has a lot of movies that ultimately fall apart because his attention to detail caused the film to just not proceed. It becomes unviable after a certain point. Is this film being literally called the worst film of all time fair to the movie? I'm gonna start by saying probably not. Especially considering, as you point out, in 2012, the director's cut comes out of the movie, and then 3 years later, the BBC lists it as the 98th out of a list of 100 greatest American films of all time.
Yeah, and some people could say, well, it's sort of a a British thing talking about an American Western so they could use that to script it. But I'll start this entire podcast now by saying this is not the worst movie ever made. It's not.
No.
It's not perfect, but it is not that. And I think the version, I can't remember the version you saw had that weird grayish sheen that he put on it later, but the one I didn't had all that removed. And
oh, right. Yeah.
It looked beautiful.
One of the things that Chris and I compared is a couple screenshots of similar scenes, and there definitely is a massive change in color quality. Like to the point where I thought for a minute, like, am I watching kind of a weird like VHS re-encode of the video? It's like, no, apparently the quote unquote restored theatrical version does have a muted color palette. What we would consider to be a color grading is kind of what's done in the 2012 version. And there is a massive visual difference. So like there are a lot of things that were done arguably to undercut it. Like one critic claimed that the 1981 re-edit that was, that came out after the original theatrical edit was actually characterized as one of the worst injustices in cinematic history. People have been pretty critical of the 80 and 81 releases of the film in a way that's not too disparate from how people criticized the original Blade Runner and the subsequent television Blade Runner edit.
Let's take a step back, though, to more of the production piece, because we're talking about like attention to detail. For instance, one of them was he wanted the train from like, I think Paint Your Wagon or whatever it was that was in Colorado. And so they had that train, I believe, put on a train to be shipped to where they were shooting this film. So they transported a train to do a train thing. But then there was something I think wrong with like the gauge on the train that he didn't like. So there's like that layer of detail that in one level is obsessive, but the other level, it is a craftsperson to care that much about these things that they're going to put on screen. So I am torn from this jump about this entire movie.
Completely agree. Like, one of the things that I understand is that he obsessively researched the time period. And so this is, from his perspective, let's put it that way, he intended it to be historically authentic.
Okay. I'm pushing back hard on that one, my friend.
I completely agree with you on this, but that's his intent.
Because like since I hadn't seen the movie, I did like a little researching myself because I wanted to know more about it. Because I didn't have time to do it when I did Haunted West. So I didn't do the amount of research you did, but I watched some videos about it, hearing people talk about it while I was working on something else. Right. And one of them talked specifically about how Cimino was saying that the Johnson County War was never put on film. It was under research and all those other things. That is grossly inaccurate. The Johnson County War is super well known. And like 30 years before this, there was like the Virginian and then like Shane were about the Johnson County War. So there's a lot of trickery and illusion that Cimino is using to propel his story. Because he's using names that are historically accurate to some extent. But the roles and things they did are definitely not historically accurate.
I chalk it up to something like Alan Moore's From Hell, right? Jack the Ripper is in no way, shape, or form an under-researched area of history. Alan Moore did a lot of research into Jack the Ripper and said, this is my belief into what actually happens. And over the years, he's kind of fossilized that into this is what actually happened, right? When people become obsessive with a particular part of history, they sometimes start to form opinions and then decide that's just the truth. When history is always meant as a science, it's supposed to be something that as we learn new information, we adapt based on the new information. So I very specifically said this is Cimino's belief as to how these things actually happened.
For instance, like Nate Champion, the Christopher Walken character here, never worked for that association. In fact, he was the antagonist of that association. He formed like his own association with the other homesteaders to fight against them. It's so now at the same time though, there was like an attack, I think, on Champion's cabin or whatever in the woods, but Champion and his buddy killed whoever the other people were. So there's lots of those things. And for instance, like Jim and Ellie here were married and they were a couple.
Right.
And this is me trying to pull history that I vaguely remember. I think they were killed by the association and lynched because she was Cattle Kate or something. Anyway, they became like she was one of the rare females who was hanged, and their death sparked the entire thing. So like the fact that Jim here doesn't die, there's
right. Yeah.
And we all know that I'm not a big fan of people that say something's historically accurate and then you throw history out the window. So
right. And so with that in mind, when he also argues that the details are also meant to be historically accurate, you have to question that as well. It's like if you're going to throw out pretty large chunks of how things actually happens, how much of these details are just because you've decided that's what you want, but you're telling everybody it's because it's accurate.
Yeah. And so to some extent, though, he is doing what nearly all white directors did when they made Westerns. They're writing the Western history the way they want it to be written.
Right, exactly. Whereas, to counterpoint, the recent Wuthering Heights film, which I have not watched, but is getting a lot of stick because it's quote-unquote not accurate to the books. And the director has come out and basically said, of course it's not, because it's a movie made in 2026, not a book written 100 years prior. These things should be adapted and modified. And I'm not trying to say it's meant to be authentic, because what does that even mean? And I'm like, that's a much more realistic attitude towards these things, I think.
I myself have feelings about Wuthering Heights that I will not go into, but anyone that knows me could know potentially what one of my issues are away.
Right. I'm not excusing it. I'm just talking about, I'm using as representative of an attitude that could have been taken by Cimino, but given everything you know about Cimino, that's fairly unlikely he was going to take that attitude, right?
So Eddie, why is Christopher Walken? Sorry, not Christopher Walken. Why is Chris Christopherson, famed musician, the lead in this movie?
I have no idea, actually.
I don't know either. I just think Cimino cast people that he wanted is what it was.
I mean, very well. And there's one casting that I am criminally upset about, but we'll get into that as we talk about the movie.
And you mentioned originally that he made people do repeated scenes, and I saw the interview with Christopher Christopherson, who was saying the scene where he has to like whip the door, he made him do like 50 times.
Jeez.
To get it right, because he hit a very specific spot. So there's that. And anyone that's heard people talk about Stanley Kubrick will know that's very similar.
Right.
The thing is, though, for Cimino, all right, for a lot of big famous directors, there's always talks about how much they love film and the history of film. I don't think that holds true, or haven't heard anything about Cimino having a love of film how they did, which I think is fascinating.
Right. I feel like, based on, again, this is like a week's research and watching one film, so I may be talking my ass, but given the fact that Cimino doesn't have a ton of work after this, I feel like honestly he's just one of those creatives that is very much in the attitude of my way or the highway, and because he had one very big success that damaged him in a very specific way, I'd be like, no, I know what's best because this one thing happens and it was great, so we shall do it my way. It is possible, I feel, to have an eclectic vision and still be collaborative. I mean, go back to your friend David Lynch. Everything I've heard, especially on our little breakdown of Lynch, was that he was intensely collaborative, but didn't suffer fools gladly and didn't take to people overriding him. But if you worked with him, he would be happy to collaborate with you on stuff. And so like it's possible to be that, right? But you're right. There's a certain school of directors, particularly from this era of filmmaking, that just really get up their own ass and like, no, it has to be this way. It's like it doesn't though, you know. One of the actually things that don't get talked about a lot in this film, it seems, is the cinematographer. is Vilmos Zsigmond, which I didn't know about as a name, but he was one of the few cinematographers in the 60s and 70s who became extremely well known for his craft. He worked on Deliverance, McCabe and Miller, Scarecrow, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and The Deer Hunter. So like he is the cinematographer behind really fantastic films. He is a genuinely a good cinematographer, and even he wouldn't work with Cimino after this movie. Which tells me that there's a certain amount of you hire people who are good at their jobs to do their jobs, and then don't let them do their jobs.
Did you know that the legendary John Williams was almost a composer for this film?
Really?
Yeah, but he got a job doing something else, I think, right before it happened.
Huh. That it would make sense. I could certainly see a John Williams score to this film. But
especially 1980, like late 70s, early 80s,
yeah, no, absolutely. Because he would have been just moving into these big films.
And so while the studio, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
While the studio gave like a lot of carte blanche to Cimino, towards the end, I don't know if you're one to go here, but like one of the things that they started doing, they started coming around, like watching everything. And for a while, there was talk about trying to get another director in to replace him.
I actually didn't know. My understanding was that Cimino basically had banned the studio from the set.
They still, from what I've seen, is like there was talk about doing that, and one of the people they considered doing it was, I forgot his name now, the director from like In the Heat of the Night, Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh wow, okay.
That guy. But in the end, there's like no, and Cimino did it.
Right.
It turned in a.
Go ahead.
I could just ramble. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. No, I was gonna go back to the impact of this film before we go talk about the film, but finish your thought.
I just want to talk about like the cut that he turned in, but if you want to talk about the other piece, we can do that first. It's up to you.
Well, no, let's talk about the cut turning, because I actually don't know about this.
So he had like got the studio people in and turned in a 5-hour and like 15-20 minute cut of the film to the studio people to watch, and they said nope.
Right.
That's when he made the short, like 3-hour and 40-minute version that was going to be released.
Right, and then they cut that down. Now I know that they intentionally took it out of his hands and cut it down even further, twice.
So I've heard though that in like I listened to an interview with the person that wrote the book. So when I'm writing, I always need something else to sidetrack my brain, and I was listening to part of this. And the person that wrote the book on him says that Cimino had more control over it, and he was blaming the studio for things like he went to the studio and said, "I want to cut it down because it wasn't being well received," and that's when he put like that weird old timey sheen on it.
Interesting. Okay.
So like he supposedly there's a lot more of Cimino doing things and less of the studio, but at the same time, it's one author I heard an interview for that could have their own opinions and not be factually accurate. So that's like the problem that I hate with this is there's so many like weird rumors and things. You're not really sure what's true anymore.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like another rumor that I heard was that the land they shot the movie on, the studio wanted to know how much they were paying, why they're paying so much for it. And it turns out the land was owned by Cimino.
Interesting. Okay. So there may be a certain amount of scam in this too.
Yeah, which could also be potentially why they might have like let reporters come in and undercut all of it.
Right. So I mentioned earlier, but like specifically, a film historian, Peter Biskind, is the person who has pushed forward a theory that the film's financial failure resulted in the demise of the director-driven film industry. How much of that is true, it's up to debate. We do know that it led to Transamerica selling United Artists to MGM, which basically ended their existence as an independent studio. So there were at least some financial business consequences specifically from this film.
And that was a studio that was founded by like Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, someone I forgot, and ardent racist W.B. Griffith.
Yeah, because United Artists was meant to be, the best analogy I can think of is because it's me, is like Image Comics, right? It was supposed to be an artist-driven studio that they would get shares and have creator rights and all of that. And then this movie ended all of that. So some people have used this as a cautionary tale for this is why you don't give creatives too much control. I would argue that's why you don't give specific creatives too much control.
I think that no one should have absolute control.
Right.
Like, it goes back to something that we talked about early on, even recording, is that there is a good balance where constraints generates creativity. And if you don't have any constraints, you can make something, but this movie is a fucking perfect example of it. Like, I don't need to go into more detail.
Sure, yeah. I mean, let's talk about that film. Is there anything else then about the background before we go into the movie? Because there's a lot of background. We could spend like a whole episode just talking about the background of this movie, but
we almost have. We're almost at like the 40-minute marker now, just talking about this.
This could be a long film to talk through. So
the thing is, I want to make sure that we talk, because the amount of impact that this movie has had or put upon it is staggering, more so than most of the other films and things that we've covered at this point. Right. And the thing is, I don't think Cimino even loved the Western either.
No.
Like at all. And some people will call this a Reconstructionist film, but some people don't even call it a Reconstruction film. It's more a film about just like class warfare to some extent, because there's nigh any indigenous people in this film.
Yeah,
or black people, or Mexican people, or anyone that's not white.
Right. I mean, whether it counts as a Western is an interesting point, and something that I actually had throughout the film, because it's about a very specific small chunk of the West, right? It's not about the West as iconic. It's not right. There's no other people of color here, but also it is have a lot of Eastern European settlers specifically, right? So it's a very specific community. But I didn't know any of the backstory about how it was the worst film movie. I did know that this movie has sometimes been pointed to as to why Westerns fell out of fashion for a good long time as big budget American films.
But that's not accurate, because we've already talked about how the Western was started falling off in like the mid 60s, which is why we started having these other iterations of the Westerns coming out. And even after this movie is gone, we're going to talk about another one after it. And then there's a boom of Westerns that comes in, and then it subsides again. But it's never as big as it was from the start, from way back in the day. So this movie is a catalyst, but it is not the cause. Is that the phrase I was looking for? I think so. Good enough.
Yeah,
it's early in the morning.
I think. Well, we're already recapping the film a little bit, but like, I mean, I think it's important because it's identity as a bad film has to influence how we talk about this film, right? So this is a weird case where we're giving our judgment before we talk about the film, although I have separate judgment on the actual film. So I feel like there are certain movies that develop a certain amount of gravity, good and bad, around them that is sometimes unearned after a certain point. Another example, I think, is actually the Speed Racer film, right? A lot of people pointed to that as the death of the Wachowskis' career, even though Wachowskis made films before and after Speed Racer just fine, right?
Yeah. And if anyone's seen Matrix 3, that's when the death of the Wachowskis happened.
Arguably, yes, right? It's like...
I said Matrix 3, motherfuckers. 3. 1, 2, 3. I want to make sure there's no confusion. That is what I said.
Right. I mean, like... their career was probably in a slump because of the unreasonable expectations that they acquired from the Matrix. Star Wars is often seen as a liminal point in how science fiction fundamentally changed. It's like science fiction was already changing before Star Wars and didn't completely change after Star Wars. So like it's people like to take certain moments in history and say that's where this thing happened. And so I think because this movie has gained so much negative attention, it's like, oh, so this is the movie that killed the Western. It's like you just said, it was clearly already dying because Italians were picking up the baton and making the movies that Americans weren't interested in making anymore. So obviously they have been were dead for 20 years before this point. But even that's not true, because we've seen quite a few American Westerns that are quite good in that time period. So like it's just it's really hard to decouple, specifically this movie. Like, most of the research into it was trying to get past the perceived wisdom of this movie being bad. So it was actually really hard for me to come into this and try to make my own uninformed judgment on this film, which is weird because I'd never seen it before. But it has developed such a reputation.
All right. Do you want to get into the film proper?
Yes.
I know that you're choosing to, and we could keep going on about the history of it, but I think we may have beaten that horse enough, much how Cimino did.
You already beat me to that joke. Okay.
Is it in there? I didn't even see it.
No,
awesome.
But
we've done this for too long now, my friend.
Yes. So 1870, two young men, Jim Averill, played by Chris Christopherson, and Billy Irvine, played by John Hurt, graduate from Harvard College. The Reverend Doctor speaks to the graduates on the association of the, quote, cultivated mind with the uncultivated, unquote, and the importance of education. Irvine, the class orator, follows this up with his opposing irreverent views. After a celebration that ends in a brawl, the male students serenade the women present, including Averill's girlfriends. I do not have Irvine's speech in my version of the movie.
I do. It wasn't that great. Like,
okay.
So, does your version have the dance in it, Eddie? That's what I want to know.
The super long, weird dance, yes.
How long was your dance? Because I think mine was longer.
Possibly. Mine was about 5 minutes.
I think mine was a little bit longer, and like it was just a bunch of dudes dancing in a circle, staring up at women, staring down at them.
Yes. It did remind me of a lot of much earlier Hollywood's blockbusters that have long dance numbers in them, right?
Yeah.
And it certainly established the epic tone of the whole movie, right? There's this massive cast of extras, this long dance number that is very much, especially in this time period, American cinematographic code for this could be a big epic thing. But it felt weird.
So I think part of it is, if memory serves, that they used to make movies like that up to around the 70s, and the 70s started shifting from the concept of you're going to the theater to be the theater all day. And this movie has a feel of that you're supposed to go to the theater to be like an event, almost how it was back in the 50s. Essentially, you're going there, you're going to be there all day. That's what it's, for my 3 hour and something version, that's what it felt like. Did yours start with like Chris Christopherson running into the scene? Like he's late for something to catch up. Like mine started with him.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
him running in to catch up with all of his classmates. And
yes.
the class scene itself goes on and on for a while.
Right.
And then you get John Hurt, who gives like a joking speech, and it's not that great to transition into the dance. Like this is like 20 odd minutes of the movie or more for me, I think.
Yeah, it was about 10 for me. I just kind of stopped there because it was a time shift after this. So I was like, it's a good chunk of movie to talk about. But like, yeah, it's, you mentioned how this was kind of an older style of film, and that leads to something that I was going to bring a bit later, but I think we can talk about now a little bit. I got the overall impression of this film that it was kind of a weird synthesis of 40s and 50s style Westerns with bits of spaghetti Western jammed into it. Because it has kind of these big, huge, epic sweeping landscapes, the kind of lots of dialogue and character work that those older Westerns tend to have, and then punctuated by brutal violence, which we'll get to later in the movie.
So like almost an homage to our Ford movies in Monument Valley that they're doing here in Wyoming.
Right. Yeah. And then a bit of that kind of Django-ish, let's just have brutal violence to kind of accentuate a point.
A bit of background stuff for people who are curious. This is supposedly Harvard, but it is not Harvard. This is Oxford, because Cimino had such like outrageous demands that he wanted that Harvard said, fuck you, we're not doing that. And this is where he then flew like the tree and everything over to shoot all this.
Yes. Right. Because he couldn't have a different, he couldn't have another tree, he had to have this tree.
Because he wanted to start in the East to have people transition over to the West, which on one level you kind of understand. So you can try to get that progress of time and everything else, people traveling over. But at the other side, it's,
Right. And it sets up this. So, okay. Something the movie touches on, but not enough in my version, is the fact that Avril and Irvine are rich. And it's something that this chunk of the movie kind of glosses over a bit, which is a bit weird because if you're going to Harvard, there's a certain amount of wealth that comes with that. And so this movie sets up a false narrative of it's the plucky poor versus the upstart rich, and it's like, no, it's also a rich guy fighting rich people.
The thing is, though, like the trailers for the movie at the time, they'll talk about like this wealthy person, but his heart was with the people and the land for one woman. Like that's like their big opening trailer bit. So you have your rich white dude, but he cares about the plebes that are below him to become one of them, to walk amongst them.
Just like Tony Stark, man of the people.
Oh, fucking asshole. There will never be any love for Tony Stark from this half of the podcast.
And yet we love Iron Man. It's weird.
It's a weird start. It's too long. That's all I'm going to say about it. It's so the bit I do know is it's supposedly one of the reasons for this long ass dance is Cimino wanted to highlight, in his opinion, at the time that like men and women couldn't really touch. So that was the whole bit for the dance, and while there's all dudes dancing in a circle looking up at women.
I don't think he succeeded.
I'm just telling what I heard.
A lot of touching that happens later in this movie.
But that's different because
I know
in the movie here, in the movie here, she is a sex worker. Right. In real life, I don't think she was.
Right. So okay. Anything else then, or move on?
We move on.
All right. 20 years later, in 1990, poor European immigrants new to the region conflict with wealthy established cattle barons organized as the Wyoming Stock Growers Association. They suspect the newcomers are stealing their cattle for food. Nate Champion, played by Christopher Walken, who's a friend of Avril and an enforcer for the stockmen, kills a settler, Mikhail Kovich, for suspected rustling and dissuades him from stealing a cow. Meanwhile, Avril is on his way to Johnson County, where he is now a marshal. At the board meeting, the head of the association, Frank Canton, tells members, including a drunk Irvine, of plans to kill 125 named settlers as thieves and anarchists, with the help of the cruel Mayor Walcott. Irvine leaves the meeting, encounters Avril playing pool, and tells him the association's plans. As Avril leaves, he exchanges bitter words with Canton. Canton and Avril come to blows, and Canton is knocked to the floor. That night, Canton recruits men to kill the settlers. So, that sounds long, but also it's kind of a fair bit of setup for not a huge amount of movie, actually.
Nope.
Again, super weird Secret Walken not talking with his affected cadence of speech that we're used to now.
Where would you like to start?
So this is where I started to develop my theory of this being kind of a juxtaposition of two different styles of Western, because we have this, again, very large, epic view of Harvard, and then we cut to a scene that pretty fastly leads to a guy rendering down a cow in a very bloody way. You know, and the immigrants who are working on the cow, I mean, it's how you would render cows to sell to people. I mean, it's not presented in a particularly ghoulish fashion, but it is presented extremely casually.
Yeah.
And so it is a jarring visual juxtaposition, which then leads to the jarring violence of him being murdered by a person we're supposed to care about later on in the film, which is wild, because I was like, oh, Chris Walken's playing the villain. That's how I actually thought at this point in the movie things were going to go.
But did you like the fact that he was kind of behind the sheet, so he was sort of hidden, so you didn't necessarily know it was Christopher Walken right away?
Yeah. That was interesting, kind of like, here's the actor you recognize reveal, you know?
So this goes back to me, once again, having issues with the historical accuracy, because I think Nate Champion was supposedly the leader of, God, I think they called it like the Northwest something Growth Association in the end when they formed their own thing. So literally it's just like a little bit of a tink. But that was all after Avril and Alan's death. So it's timing's all wrong. The people are wrong. So they just took names to put to people. I won't mention any more. Just want to stress it one more time.
Sure,
it's not historically accurate.
But that has very kind of People's Front of Judea vibes.
So
we're not this association, we're that association.
And I know in the actual description I pulled from Wikipedia, it says that Avril is a marshal. I don't think in the movie it ever says that, if I'm not mistaken. It's kind of implied.
No,
sorta?
At one point in time, we haven't talked about this character yet, but Avril has a brief conversation with the Irish station master, who calls him Marshal in passing. That is the only time I've ever saw it in the whole movie mentioned he was a marshal.
And I want to take a beat that my movie was over 3.5 hours long, and it is not clarified any better than yours.
Right. I was hoping you would actually have more information on that. That's disturbing.
No additional clarity. All right. Let's take a step back, I guess, for a moment. Johnson County War, the most important bits people need to know is that the government, I want to say in like 1962 until 1930, I think, gave out essentially like land grants to people that gives them acres of land and everything else they could go and grow shit on. I think it was maybe 1 to 2 million people took them up on it from all sorts of different backgrounds.
Yep.
Just not immigrants. And the thing is, even the immigrants that came here weren't starving immigrants necessarily. They came in, they had cattle, and it became the fact that the cattle would go across the landscape and they would like graze and everything else. Eventually, they'd have more and more people, like the cattle barons got more and more cattle, which meant there was less land, less stuff for them to graze and feed on. Cattle barons would fire the cowboys, and the cowboys would put in for land grants to become farmers and homesteaders like them, which therefore made even less land and everything else, eventually leading to what sparked the Johnson County War.
Okay.
Side history.
That's fair. We're not there yet, but like later on in the film, you do start to see that there are different levels of the immigrants. They're not just all poor, starving babushkas struggling on the land, right? Like, that there are different layers to them.
Yeah.
We're not quite there yet. We'll talk about that more, I think, when we get there. But you're right. There is some. For all the stick I gave a couple previous movies of having a big long info dump at the front, talk about the history, I could have used that for this movie because there was a lot of me catching up to what was going on, and not a fun way.
But this goes back to the fact I don't think Cimino is like a director's director or have a love of the history, because he didn't provide context. It's like he knew of terms and vague recollections of it, and he had a vision he wanted to craft. And so he put a lot of expectations on the viewer to compensate for that. But now, as modern viewers, we have a lot of context from all the movies and things that we've seen and how Western should work, that we can apply those to it. Back then, in like 1980, they didn't have that context.
Okay.
Which I also think is why the movie now people are putting on their best list, because they have all these Westerns to base their theories on, and like having rewatched them. Because we've got VHS tapes now, maybe
just about. I think Betamax was 79, maybe. So
before that, if you didn't see a movie, or if it wasn't in repeat on TV somewhere, you have no reference point for it. Now we can like rent a movie, watch it all day long, buy it until we have almost a scientific understanding of the format. They didn't have that.
Right. Actually, an interesting example of that at the time of recording, 2 new Doctor Who episodes from the original season 3 in the 60s have surfaced, and people are rewatching them, and there's been some interesting reappraisal of it's the first 3 episodes of Master Plan of Daleks, and so people are now having a reappraisal of that, and so seeing that the takes online, and people who suddenly recognize like, oh, the first Doctor is very different from the previous Doctors, like yeah. But people's memories of those episodes versus actually seeing them now, because there's such a huge gap, but it's still just in lived memory, has been interesting. And I think to your point, kind of the same thing of like, uh, if you haven't seen a Western in a while, and you watch this, you go, "Oh, this isn't really a Western," or whatever. Um, but now that you're right, we have there's a body of work that we can look at a moment's notice. I mean, like, honestly, there's also a certain amount of Kurosawa, in some regard. There's a certain amount of the slightly languid samurai movie pacing, in this too. So I mean, like, yeah, I'm certainly seeing like, oh, this is it fits in that genre pretty well for me. But I can also see what you're saying. Like, if you haven't watched any in a while, I'd be like, this, what the hell is this?
Well, there's a lot of question about which genre of Western it falls under. Like, some people call it a revisionist Western, some people don't call it a revisionist Western, but it's definitely not a classic Western. So it's
no.
Right. And fun enough that you mentioned Doctor Who. All right, I was thinking about it. Like I said, I listen to stuff as I'm writing, and so one of them is like YouTube thing I watched about Doctor Who, and I realized how old I am to hear like the person say, "So these new Hartnell episodes came out. I've never seen Hartnell because when I was a kid growing up, my doctor was Matt Smith." Oh, Eddie. Oh, I felt like a dagger in my heart. Like someone leaped out of my computer and stabbed me. It's like, oh God.
Oh, the pain. All these youngins.
So now they're like, I may go back and watch them because of these new episodes.
I mean, cool, but also Matt Smith, really? No.
Yeah.
Damn. He's the new doctor, right?
He's from like New Who, not even New Who.
Right.
I forgot we were going to talk about Doctor Who.
We're up to the board meeting.
Okay.
And like, I know I've been doing a thread of this Western thing seems super relevant in 2026, but damn bunch of rich dudes blaming foreigners for crimes to get them murdered feels very relevant in 2026.
Does, doesn't it?
It shows that it's an old tactic. It's been around for a very long time.
Yeah. They say, why change it if it works, huh?
Right. So for me, this is the first time I actually get to see John Hurt doing any actual acting, right? Because he's largely cut from the original chunk of the movie. And I like John Hurt as an actor. Because John Hurt is one of those actors that he does, Shakespeare and classical stuff all the time, but also is perfectly fine to be like the guy who dies in Alien. He's.
Should you be saying Sir John Hurt? Is that what it is?
I don't think he got his knighthood actually. Unlike Sir Derek Jacobi, his contemporary. But they're both
Sir
the same
Ian
school
McKellen?
of like. Right. Actually, Ian's actually a pretty good character. He's like, sometimes you do the high importance, high quality film, and sometimes it's like, this looks fun, and John Hurt's definitely in that category. So watching him just being like a drunk lout in random scenes is actually really fun. But I'm conflicted because like beyond one other scene at the end, in my version, John Hurt's largely been cut out of the film, which is a tragedy on one level. But on the other hand, I can also see why you probably want to largely cut him out of the film because he doesn't do anything.
In my version, he pops up maybe 4 times.
Yeah.
So
you need him here. That. Well, I say you need him here so that way he can get the plan to Avril and get it in his hands. And you have to have the scene at the front where their classmates understand why he would want to give Avril those plans, right? But beyond that, he kind of falls out of the story.
Because they were friends in college, and it's 20 years later, they're still friends.
Right.
So that established their friendship. But it's funny you mentioned that you want more of John Hurt, because one of the things I heard is that he waited around set for so much to do that he ended up leaving to go shoot his scenes for The Elephant Man and then coming back to do more work on this film.
Wow. Ridiculous.
Like, it took that long because
such a criminal waste of John Hurt, man.
I don't understand necessarily why we have Jim sitting there shooting pool, other than to try to antagonize the people that are going to be there. Like, the motivations for Jim aren't making a lot of sense for me at this point in the film.
No. So I kind of half put it together, but it's not. It's very wobbly. Because when he comes in on the train, which he kind of skipped over that scene because just he comes on a train. It's not a big deal.
Well, we do
He
get to
makes a
see
comment.
like them kill like her husband, and then he kind of comes in to sort of defend her.
Right. Yeah. Um, but he talks to the station master, whose name I forgot, but it's later in my notes, so I'll see it in a second. Um, and he's like, I'm just coming through town. I need a place to stay. He makes a stray comment about going to his old club. And then we have this scene, right? But the problem is that you don't see him, in my version, you don't see him enter the club at any point in time. He's just there. So
Correct.
it feels like Chibnall had a scene in mind and didn't really care how we got there.
That's happens a lot in this film.
Right. Yeah. So it's like you could cut John Hurt's character out entirely if you just had Avril like overhearing, like eavesdropping on the conversation, or even just having him in the meeting and getting up and storming out. Right. Like, no, the characters need to be there. And so that's when I started to realize, like, this isn't a bad film for me at this point in time, but I could certainly see where it is. Like, how much of this is because scenes are cut out, and how much of this is it's just not structured well. And it sounds like I didn't miss much. There wasn't a scene that kind of linked all this together better.
It's, I think somewhere they do list the scenes that are cut out, but mostly it's just the scenes are trimmed. So
Interesting.
structurally, it's almost the exact same movie.
Okay.
You just don't get to live in the world as long as I did.
Well, you don't get to watch guys saying there's flies crawling over their faces for 20 minutes.
Though the death list now it's presented was interesting to watch. I think the real one had, and there was like a real death list. I think it had about 70 names on it.
Okay. There were a number of comments throughout the movie to the effect of that's basically the entire community. That's basically all of the county. Which struck me as a bit odd because there's a plot point later about who's on the list, who's not on the list. But like, I felt like there was something that was supposed to be communicated that didn't get communicated because, and no point they answer the question of why they just say we're just gonna murder the whole county, right? Who? Because if you're gonna be that specific, who's not on the list seems like it should be a relevant point. But there's a big twist later, which we'll get to, where like so and so's on the list. It's like, well, just whatever's on the list. So why is that a huge shock? And in this scene, they talk a lot about justifying all the people on that list because they're all anarchists and they're all thieves. And it's like, but if it's basically everybody in the county, what you're basically saying is everyone in the city is stealing from us. Which seems like I couldn't tell if that was the intent was this was a weird legal precedent that the rich people were using to justify slaughtering people, which is where I landed in my head on. Although the movie didn't communicate that, or if it was them trying to talk themselves into something, which later in the movie made it pretty clear that they were already talked into this long ahead of time. So like, I feel like the answer is A, but the movie is very unclear on this point.
I feel like it's both A and B in this scene. Like Canton here is already fully on board and links the president somehow in this conversation.
Yeah. But Irvine's clearly unhappy with this, right?
Yeah. So he's trying to convince everyone else to do it. And most of the other people are like, sure, what the fuck? We don't care. But you have Irvine, who is supposedly a compassionate person who has some quibbles but goes along with it.
Right. And that's another, again, because we see Irvine so little in this movie, at least in my version, it's like, why do I care about his feelings? If I saw more of Irvine, I might care more about how this rich man starts to grow a conscience amongst a bunch of callous businessmen, and that leads him to drink, right? But instead, it's like you're the plot relevant reason why the rich guy we care about gets the information that he needs.
It's just working class. That is,
yeah.
It is a movie about social class completely.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Anything else in this chunk before we move on?
Nah, that's good.
Okay. Ellen Watson, a bordello madam from Quebec who accepts stolen cattle as payment for use of her prostitutes, sex workers, is infatuated with both Avril and Champion. After riding into town to show off a new horse and carriage Avril bought Watson, they skate in a crowd, then dance alone in an enormous roller skating rink called Heaven's Gate, which has been built by local German entrepreneur John L. Bridges. After getting incredibly drunk, Avril is taken by Champion and hidden amongst the settlers before Champion returns to Watson and tries to convince her to quit being a sex worker and marry him. Now, I need to talk about Jeff Bridges for a second. Jeff Bridges speaking German is fucking wild, right? My brain short-circuited. And then I finally got my head wrapped around that to realize that Jeff Bridges is playing a character named John Bridges. And I was like, is this movie a parody? It's not, but it was just a weird, surreal moment for me. Oh, I forgot. In the middle of that, he blows up the ass of a chicken in the middle of that whole scene. Just to add to it all.
I can't remember if we mentioned that supposedly this film was accused of animal cruelty.
Yes.
For multiple accounts.
Yes.
Okay.
Apparently, the rumors are, according to this reporter that filed this report, that the cockfight scene was not staged at all. It was just a bunch of cocks fighting.
And I think they said they actually killed 4 horses or something too, and a bunch of other stuff.
Right. And this would have been right before the APCA started being on movie sets, I want to say. I don't know if this led to that, but I know it was like in the 80s is when they started having the cited French cruelty animals, ASCPCA, sorry, being on set to make sure these things didn't happen.
Ellen Watson, our bordello madam, which you don't know that yet, and it's barely, you barely figure it out. I think there's one scene where it becomes apparent, but it's never like stated anywhere in the movie. Like there is no concern about the viewer understanding this movie.
So yeah, because what I managed to piece together near the end of the film is that she and all of her workers all live in the same house. And so she runs her business out of her house. And you know what? I work from home too. I get it, but it's not clear.
Yeah,
this ends other films I will not mention because I said I wouldn't say that movie again on one episode. Are movies where I didn't really understand what was happening until I read someone else's summary of the film. And unlike previous films, this one I more or less understood what was going on, but there were context and nuances. And again, I chalked it to maybe I'm just missing it because I'm watching theatrical release as opposed to the full release. It sounds like I didn't miss much.
No, so I got most of the movie where it was going, but that's because I have a whole bunch of context as a modern viewer. I'm saying now, I'm specifically pointing out the film does not explain anything as it goes through. And I'm not saying it needs to do like Conan O'Brien did and Sterling K. Brown did a great gag about movies being explained in movies where they like replicate the scene from Casablanca. Like, if you haven't seen it, you should go watch it. It's fucking hilarious. Okay. But it doesn't need to do that, but it needs to either add additional context for background. Because we see Ellen, she pops up. She's just hanging out, I think, in his house. I don't know. But, and she's naked. And she runs around naked. And then they run around naked. And then, like, these naked women pop out, which you could then assume that maybe she's a sex worker. Maybe they're all sex workers. Maybe they're just family. Who the fuck knows?
And like you and I have both been very positive on movies that don't treat the audience like idiots and let us work things out for ourselves, right? So like conceptually, I'm with you. But I'm also with you. Like in this specific case, I did feel like I was always about 5 minutes behind the film, and I never got to catch up, except for like the big fight scene at the very, very, very end. Even then, I then immediately caused them problems to get to. But like, because it's this scene where we find out, oh, by the way, Avril's actually filthy rich, which is a pretty important point. It's implied heavily. Again, he went to Harvard. He's part of the gentleman's club. It's implied, but here he's like, I bought you this horse and carriage because I like you. And she is a sex worker, right? So basically, it's like they don't have an existing relationship. Although that again was unclear until later in the movie. At this point, I thought they were actually boyfriend and girlfriend, but no, she's just his preferred sex worker, and so she decided to do something nice for her and buy her a horse and carriage, which is a supremely rich guy thing to do.
Yeah. And like her driving that carriage with him racing along and the fear in his face. Beautiful. Beautiful. Like there's some amazing beats in the movie, but there's a whole bunch of excess.
Right. But there's also cool stuff like so one thing that was interesting about reading other breakdowns of this movie is that other summaries said that all of these settlers were German, right? But I watched with the subtitles on, and the subtitles, with a couple of exceptions, actually identified the language people were talking, and there were a lot of different languages being talking. There was German, there was Serbo-Croatian, there was Russian, there was Polish, and at one point in time, Champion talks in Polish just as a throwaway bit. And there's a scene earlier we kind of glossed over where Champion aggressively beats someone for being explicitly racist. Which very much implies that Champion does not speak English as his native language, which is a plot point that again gets reiterated later. But that leads, I think, to what you're talking about earlier, which is that there's all these cool character moments that if I was not actually studying the film with a plot summary next to me, I don't think I would have caught them all or even understood half of them.
Okay. Heaven's Gate. Did you get a... What's that?
I was going to ask you from a historical perspective, did you actually know if roller skating actually existed at this time?
Yeah, it did. I think like roller skates were been around for a long time before this.
Okay.
But your scene, did you see the full scene, multiple minutes, full song played of a guy playing like his fiddle on roller skates and roller rink? Did you get that full scene?
I believe so. At one point in time he falls down but keeps playing and...
Okay. Because I'm curious if they like truncated your scene there, if they like made you endure all of that.
I zoned out at one point. It was that long. So like, okay, peek behind a curtain. With rare exceptions, usually what I do is I have the video on one half of my screen, and I have our document on the other, and so like I'm usually taking notes and whatnot. And most of the time, I'm bouncing back and forth between them. And occasionally, like if the scene's going a bit long, it's like, okay, I'll just kind of rewrite this chunk while I'm waiting for the scene to finish up whatever fuckery it's doing. At one point in time, I ended up surfing Blue Sky during this scene. So that's how long this scene was.
Oh, no. What we forgot. So we mentioned earlier, there was the chicken fighting scene, or cockfighting, I think it's called.
Chicken fight.
I believe, uncredited, but I read it somewhere that this is William Dafoe's film debut is in this movie.
I was wondering if one of the people in the background was Willem Dafoe. I was like, that looks really... That feels like it's Willem Dafoe, but I'm not sure. I didn't want to say anything.
Supposedly, he was supposed to have a larger role, but... And because, like, what was the story? All right, so what I read is that Cimino wanted people that looked foreign, that could speak additional languages, and, like, Dafoe came in and read this, like, entire monologue in Dutch. And so he hired him. The thing is, Willem Dafoe didn't speak Dutch. His friend had written it out phonetically for him, so he memorized it. And on the set, Cimino's like, give me another thing like that. And Dafoe was like, fuck. So he said, all right, well, fuck you. And he put him in the background of a scene. And so Dafoe's in the background of the scene. And during a break, when everything was supposed to be silent, a woman made a joke to Dafoe and he laughed out loud. And then Cimino said, William. And he called him and he sent him to the hotel room. And the assistant told him, the director no longer wants you in this movie.
Damn.
But then Cimino tried to get him to be in a movie sometime later. And I think in the end, they said Willem Dafoe did the voiceover for like the making of this movie that came out in 2004. Huh. So
weird.
But everybody's kind of in this movie though. If they're white, they can just keep popping up.
No, yeah, that was the other thing that like throughout this whole movie, it was like, that's Chris Christopherson. That's Christopher Walken. It's like I recognize a lot of these actors, and it just became from like a bunch of actors that I either didn't recognize or I started to recognize over exposure to the Western genre to just like these are all people that I can name drop now without having to look them up. So it was a weird shift, which again, like in '90s, this happens too, right? The celebrity-driven Western becomes more of a thing. There are people who are famous for being celebrities in other cases than people for being famous for being Western actors. So it's not, but yeah, you're right. It's definitely kind of here's a lot of white actors that either have an established career or are starting to have very well established careers in a few years from here.
I'm not going to give away my opinion of the movie for the summary from it. But the thing is, if Jeff Bridges had been the lead of this film, it would be better. Is all I'm going to say.
I could see that.
He's essentially becomes like the second lead in the film, more so than Christopher Walken.
He certainly does. Yes. Yeah. Like at this point, it's just it's Jeff Bridges. Okay, that's wild, but okay, but it just keeps popping up, and then we only get his name because his name's on the roller rink and his name's on later another building. So like John L. Bridges is plastered everywhere, and I was like, is that a joke? That can't be the character he's actually playing. And then I started putting the pieces together, and it's like, oh my god, he's actually playing a character named John Bridges. That's hilarious.
Because the dude will abide.
The dude will abide. Yeah. Anything else about this?
I would have never conceived the concept of having a fiddler roller skate playing a song the entire time. That's it. Like that's something that would have never popped into my mind.
You don't have Chimino's vision, obviously.
I do not.
Okay. The next day, Avril receives a copy of the association's death list from Minardi, a baseball-playing U.S. Army captain, and discovers Watson's name on the list. Confronting Champion with the addition of Watson's name, Avril learns that he's proposed to Watson. Avril later reads the names aloud to settlers who are thrown into terrified turmoil. Cully, a station master and friend of Avril's, sees the train at Canton's posses heading north and rides off to warn the settlers, but is murdered en route. Later, a group of association men come to Watson's bordello, slaughter her workers, and rape her. Avril shoots and kills all but one of them. Champion goes on to Canton's camp and shoots Morrison, the remaining rapist, and then refuses to participate in the slaughter of the settlers on the list. And I am so goddamn tired of rape being used as a motivator for male revenge.
Yes.
But anyway, that aside, there's another, again, throwaway bit of Champion has a book in front of him and a piece of paper, and he's writing. And I realized he doesn't know how to write English. Right. So another very small scene of like Champion's not, he's an immigrant as well, which could have been a very cool thing, right? Like it's all only through implication you get a sense of, oh, this guy who's being forced to murder immigrants is himself an immigrant. But at no point does the movie say that part out loud anywhere.
Yeah, and I don't know if he's being forced. I think he's just being paid.
Well, sure,
because
but, you know what I'm saying?
He specifically talks about getting wallpaper for the cabin to try to impress Ellen with.
It's fancy wallpaper. Which is actually a funny bit. This movie's not adverse for such a dour film. It actually has some interesting comedic bits, but they're so muted. And that was one of them. It's like, that could have been genuinely funny, but it's so clamped down. It's like, oh, man.
And we get a young Mickey Rourke popping up in this movie.
Yeah. He played Cully, right? The station master?
He was a gunman who was in the in Walken's cabin.
Okay. I missed that actor then. Because the guy playing Cully I thought was also familiar, but I can't place him.
He is, but he's not the young Mickey. This is like Mickey Rourke before he became like a leading man for a brief window of time, like when he was at his peak hotness.
Right. Okay. So before that,
so you did see like the mountain man that grabs him by the tongue, right? The tongue talk.
Yeah.
Mickey Rourke is the guy who gets his tongue grabbed.
Yeah, right. He looks very different.
Yeah. Oh, grab him by the tongue. Oh my god. Like disturbing and hilarious all at once.
Right.
Like they're such good touches, but it's like the touches that would make the movie really pop are not leaned into. In fact, they're there to make you think something really cool could happen, and then it's all undercut with something that is irrelevant and not as pertinent.
Right. Like, to go back to Buck and the Preacher, for example, there's lots of funny bits in Buck and the Preacher, but they're all motivated towards getting you to really appreciate and love these characters. So that way, when the events happen, you care about them more, right? Um, Red Sun did the same thing. Whereas this, it's like it feels like you're supposed to like Champion more, but the problem is it's not Champion. It's all the people around him. They're doing this stuff,
Yeah.
so you can't just transpose that onto them. And in fact, it's even worse because we get them, we grow to like them because of his funny moments, and then they're murdered within a few minutes of the movie. So it's just cheap.
And it's built on also, I think one of the lures was supposed to be like a love triangle between Champion, Jim, and Ellen all together.
Right.
But it's not earned either. Even though, like, I think it might be jumping ahead to a point where she tells like Jim that I made him pay every time, like something like that.
Right.
So it's
later, yeah.
Nothing's earned in the film, and that is starting at this point. I'm super being graded by the film because I watched the long version, so I got like a lot more language scenes, and I'm super irritated that nothing's earned. I'm doing all the work for the film, and it's not giving me anything back.
Right. And the Cully is actually another good example of that. Like, because like we see Station Master comes in, talks to Avril way at the start of the movie, and he pops up like a minute later, and they're all very consequential scenes. But then now we have him on his own. He finds out about the plot. He tries to interrupt them, and he gets murdered. And that's when I realized something we've been talking about is about the role of violence in the Western. Thus far, we have put films into two categories, which is one shot kills you or an implausible number of shots kill you, right? This movie commits probably the biggest sin so far, which is that a number of shots only kills you if you have a name. Otherwise, only one shot kills you. Because Cully takes an implausible number of shots to die.
Because we're supposed to care about Cully at this point in time.
Right. He literally has plot armor. You know? He can take more shots because the director has decided we care about him.
Yeah. And supposed to be more impactful. Kind of how when Marvel, spoiler if you haven't seen Endgame and all those guys, when Marvel does the snap and we get that long ass death scene between Peter Parker and Tony Stark. Oh, Mr. Stark, I don't feel so good. Oh, what's going to happen to me? Everyone else is like dust, not Spider-Man. Because people are supposed to care about Spider-Man. It's more painful and impactful.
Right.
But
and
we don't care about Cully at all. Like, come on. He's done nothing.
Yeah, and like up to this point, you know, violence is an important part of Western as a genre, right? Even if it's only implied, it's still present in some level. And I'm fine with either tactic. Either violence is extremely deadly, or violence is just a metaphor for explaining something, and it's just kind of a cool visual thing. But again, like we've had violent encounters up to this point in time, and we have a violent encounter, and they're so starkly different in how they're handled. And that, spoiler, the rest of the movie does exactly the same thing. Like people who are characters we're supposed to care about will take tons and tons and tons of shots. Characters that we don't care about die immediately. And it's so ham-fisted.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's also a bit about a bunch of rich people telling themselves that it's okay to do this because they're in legal rights, to justify what they want to, and then get surprised when they have consequences. Again, that's today.
I don't really want to focus on the rape scene.
Yep. Happy to move on.
The only thing I do want to touch on is that when Champion comes in to the army base and like with all the barons are, and he kills the one guy, Why wouldn't he kill all of them at that point?
The movie makes a half-assed way to explain that he can kind of get away with killing that guy because he committed a crime and therefore it's legal for him to shoot him. But everybody else, as mere collaborators covering up the crime, could not legally be shot. But again, to your earlier point, I'm filling in a lot of the gaps from the movie on this one.
Yeah, because I know there was a banter between he tells like Canton, you haven't killed anyone yourself, which I don't think is true.
Right.
Real life, I think Canton was like a marshal that becomes the head of this thing, and it's villain whole thing. But there is no way that the champion, even the movie that we have, would know that if he kills someone here, they're not going to kill him.
Right.
I know it would like cut the movie short, but I see no reason why he just wouldn't come in, shoot that guy first, then shoot the rest of them, and then deal with the consequences. Like that's
right. It's
plot armor.
It's plot armor, and it's again like literally that guy has no name and therefore gets one shot in the head and he's dead. Only reason why I know his name is because Wikipedia told me. It's probably in the credits. But also it kind of reinforces there are certain scenes that need to happen, and all of other stuff is just linking to those big tentpole scenes. Right. And this is champion now. The consequences of his previous actions have now come to roost at his and the people he cares about, and so he's going to start up the revenge wagon because that's what he needs to do. And it's just like, cool,
yeah,
but nothing you've done makes me care about Champion. He's an asshole and murders people, and now he's murdering people because they kind of hurt someone he loves. I shouldn't say kind of hurt. They very badly hurt someone he loves. But it's again, it's just
he's killing people for money, Eddie. Like literally, we as viewers are supposed to care more about the working class people. That's apparent because most of us are working class, so we're supposed to care more about them. Champion is actively essentially killing off the people we're supposed to care about. So then we're supposed to care about him in addition to that because of his love triangle. That doesn't work. But then it's like, are we supposed to then care about Jim, who is a marshal of these people, as supposedly helping them? Who's been a dick?
Right. Right. Yeah. It's
the only person I'd care about would be Ellen, but then I don't really care about Ellen that much because she's technically playing both of these dudes against each other. So I have no big emotional link to her. I don't think she should be assaulted in a movie. So I don't have a tether for the film, is what it boils down to.
Right. Now, I will say the one thing I was liking at this point in time is I was like, I did enjoy the fact that we have a lot of morally complicated characters, right? It's like, it is actually kind of refreshing to, in a Western, have characters who are not falling into neat categories. The problem is, and this is something that only occurred to me after I finished watching the movie, admittedly, was that there are characters who absolutely do fit into neat categories. So the movie is undercutting its own message because Canton is explicitly, unironically, and unalloyed a villain.
With a capital V.
Right, yeah. He is a pantomime villain, practically. He is, I'm going to kill all the poor people, basically, and it's only in retrospect does that go, oh, that's an interesting metaphor for capitalism. But, at the time, that certainly wasn't what was going on. He was just the unambiguous bad guy. And we have several ambiguous good people. But then again, later, we also have a later scene with a lot of the, including the scene I quote, where a lot of the put upon immigrants are unambiguously good people. So you're right. What ends up actually happening is just the people that we see the most screen time of are all just kind of jerks.
Yeah. Which is why I go back to thinking that if Jeff Bridges was a lead, he would have had, I think, enough charisma or something to keep you engaged with him if he had played Avril.
Yeah.
No offense to Chris Christopherson, who's doing the best he can, but he doesn't have whatever that it is. And I think like this movie pretty much scuttled his acting career for decades until he popped back up later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, even if Jeff Bridges' German accent basically disappears after the first scene, but yes.
Well, yeah. I could make a bunch of comments about other actors and actresses did the same thing, but there's a reason for that.
Oh yeah, like that Irish accent. Like the whole time, I was like, "Are you actually Irish and trying to inject American into your accent, or is this a really shitty Irish accent?" I actually can't tell.
Okay.
All right, moving on. Watson breaks up with Avril and after drinking heavily gets fired by the mayor. Canton, Walcott, and their men encounter one of Champion's friends who is leaving a cabin with Champion and his friend Nikki Ray inside, and a gunfight ensues. Attempting to save Champion, Watson arrives in her wagon and shoots one of the hired guns before escaping on horseback because she is a badass. Nikki is killed before Canton's men push a burning cart towards the cabin, setting it on fire. Champion writes a last letter to Ella before emerging from the burning cabin, shooting at Canton's men, but is killed in a hail of bullets. Watson warns the settlers of Canton's approach, but another vast, chaotic gathering at Heaven's Gate. The cowardly mayor of the county, Charlie Lazick, proposes to deliver the people on the list peacefully. At the same time, the young pharmacist, Mr. Eggleston, claims that the only way to survive is to arm themselves and fight the enemy army. The agitated settlers approve Eggleston's idea and rush into battle with Bridges and Ella leading them. With the hired invaders now surrounded, both sides suffer casualties, including a drunken, poetic Irvine, as Canton leaves to bring help. Watson and Avril return to Campion's charred and smoking cabin and discover his corpse along with a handwritten letter documenting his last minutes alive. Again, some of this stuff I put in here because Wikipedia tells me that is what happened in the movie. I cannot actually confirm that's actually what happened in the movie. Like,
this is pretty much what happens in the movie.
Sure, but like Watson warning the settlers of Canton's approach, which is a huge plot hole in the actual film I watched because that does not happen. No one tells them they're actually coming. They just realize they're coming.
I'm trying to remember, but I think it happens. I can't speak with 100% certainty.
So that might be blocked out more of this movie. Difference. Fair enough. And also, at least in my version, it was a little muddy whether it was Bridges and Ella actually leading them. They kind of just all leave with guns.
They were the named characters in the scene.
Right. I think it's more accurate. So that was what I got.
So effectively, they led them because you had like Jim leaving, essentially. Right. So, I guess I should, my behind the scenes thing is, I watched a longer version of this, but there's so much going on in right now for me, for busy wise, is I had to sit down 10 times to finish this movie, Eddie. Like that is how much I kept getting interrupted and I had to like repiece it together. So it's like a 3-hour and 40-minute movie that I watched like 5 hours because I had to jump back a little bit to remember where shit was.
I watched this in 4 chunks, but that's just because I kept getting interrupted. Now, for all of the frustrations over scenes maybe going on a bit too long, I actually really liked the debate at Heaven's Gate for a couple of reasons. One, I've been very clear. I am someone who loves a big meaty monologue, and the pharmacist doing a big meaty monologue. I was like, as soon as I heard that, I was like, okay, I've got to make that into my quote, even though half of it was a different language. And I also like the fact that these people with different languages were arguing with each other in their native language occasionally, right?
Yeah.
It did bring up a big problem with that scene, though, which is that people with different languages were arguing as if they understood each other and only occasionally defaulting to English, right? So, like, someone would say something in German, someone else will respond in Serbian. So it's like, okay.
I guess this is more of a historical context. Is the thing is, and the movie should do this, but it implies but doesn't say it, is that since there were so many people together. All right, for Haunted West, one of the reasons that I have so many language points for people is that there were so many different cultures together that people would pick up bits and pieces of other people's languages. So you might have like German at 10 or 20% and your own language at like 60%. But that is how you could communicate things, and you drop down to some shared language. Because if you're living in the same community for years, even if you don't speak the same language, you'll start recognizing some key parts of the words and things.
Sure.
So,
because that's one thing. That's one thing I liked about Pharmaceutics is he starts his argument in his own language, realizes I might be losing some of the audience, and then repeats himself in English, and then continues his speech in English, and a couple times stumbles. Right, like I didn't put in stumbles because I didn't feel comfortable doing them, but like he like around pastures, he's like clearly groping for a word, and then just throws out pastures, and he thinks he realizes it's not quite the right word, but he's in the throes of it, wants to move on. And like, if the whole movie was like this, I would have really loved it, because I was like, this to me was like, this is the heart of the film, and this guy only gets one scene,
and it happens so late in the movie.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like, and then he's like, and granted, obviously, Eat the Rich is a very strong vibe today, and I get that, but I think even in 1980, arguably even more in 1980, this kind of vibe would have played well. And so, like, the oppressed working class rising up to take control of their own destinies is the point of the film. And we're hours into it before the movie even starts acknowledging that's what's actually going on. It implies a lot throughout, but this is the first time it kind of goes, okay, yeah, by the way, here's what the movie's all about. And what's really frustrating about that is this is a fantastic scene. One of the named characters is in it, which is John Bridges, and he says like 2 lines at the very beginning and then is absent for the rest of it, which shows that none of the named characters are relevant to the actual core of the movie. And in one respect, I like that, in the sense of we don't have the rich people coming in and telling the poor people how they should feel. Because it could have been a version where Avril comes in and whips them all up to do this, right? Avril could have had that speech, and that would have been terrible, right? The fact that this was a groundswell, that they decided this themselves, I actually do like. But it also shows how disconnected the core cast are from the rest of the actual movie.
Because it is essentially at least 2 movies slammed together into one.
Yeah.
And I use the word slam very specifically because it's not melded or integrated well.
Right. And the battle scene is actually a really good example of that, because it is I mentioned before that the movie felt like it was a melding of the epic American Western with the spaghetti Western violence. And both are happening in that scene, but they don't feel organically gelled together. It feels like we have the big sweeping epic classic Western, and then there's just random shots of people getting brutally murdered. It's literally spliced in. They don't feel like they flow into each other in any way.
One of the best things, though, I can say about the battle scene is that regardless of gender, everyone is out there kicking ass.
Yeah.
Which is how it would be. Your community, you're all your lives are on the line. There ain't no time for bullshit.
I appreciate that. I appreciate this unexpected thread of badass sex workers throughout all these movies that continues to be going on, Emma gets quite a lot to do in this battle scene. And there are so many extras on scene. The battle genuinely feels chaotic and scary in a way that only those massive big budget Westerns could really pull off, right? Because one of the reasons why the spaghetti Westerns, it felt like, went with the shock is because they had so little resources, right? It's the only thing they can do to communicate this idea across. Like, you have 5 guys in the scene, you have to do something to make it feel. But this is what those American classic Westerns did well, was a scope. And so it's like, let's use that. And it was like, it's a good thing. But then again, it feels disconnected from the other bits. So it's weird that the violent scenes actually seem to take away from the battle, is my impression. It was like, here's this cool battle going on. Oh, and then here's a guy getting shot. It's like, well, obviously I know that happens in battles, but I want to see the spectacle of hundreds of people doing horrible shit to each other, because like that's a thing you don't get to see very often in these kinds of movies. I want to see more of that.
True, and the most impactful part for me of it, one of the most impactful parts for me of it, is you get the shot of Irving in the middle of the thing drinking and talking about, I was in Paris last year. How am I essentially fucking here in America in this shithole? before he gets shot. Like,
Yeah.
that is striking and powerful, that comment on like the entire American West and that conflict.
Yeah, and how disconnected the rich were from these struggles. Like, he's literally in the middle of a fight and he can't even process what's going on. He's so divorced from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And again, like, because yes, Irvine has a name. He's played by John Hurt, so it's amazing. But like, he's basically been a non-entity in this movie until now. So he might as well be another chunk of the movie that's been divorced from the main cast. So again, it's like most of this movie is happening in spite of the main cast, not because of it.
And he takes one shot and falls down. I'm not sure if he's dead though. That's the thing. Right. Hit and he's down.
But we don't see him again, so who knows?
Good as dead.
Next day, Avril reluctantly joins the immigrant settlers with their cobbled-together siege machines and explosive charges in an attack against Walcott's men and their makeshift fortifications. The battle was fiercer and more desperate. Despite the heavy losses the immigrants suffer, including Eggleston himself, they managed to inflict a vast number of casualties on the mercenaries' army. Walcott himself, while trying to escape, is killed by Avril, who hits him with an explosive charge. Before the settlers wipe out the enemies, the U.S. Army show up with Canton and Minardi, thus stopping the battle. The mercenaries are arrested, though Avril knows this is just a facade to save them and make them avoid a criminal charge. And finally, the movie finally seems to be hitting a groove now, you know? Like, you have this horrible scene combined with one of the soldiers dropping his pants and Avril just going, "That man is a friend of the president." You know, it's like you finally figured out the tone 2 hours in.
3 hours in.
Right, for you. And like you have this brutal, gritty fight scene with this bonkers siege engine of like guys with a rolling barricade they're shooting behind, right? And it's like the juxtaposition of the mundane and the sublime would have been a fantastic tone for this whole movie, of like taking the very small things composed with the very large things and constantly jamming together would have been a fantastic vibe for this whole film. And I feel like the movie was trying to go there, but it kept just setting those things side by side rather than actually mixing them.
Is it sad that I believe more that the people of Rock Ridge could build an entire town and people faster and more efficiently than I believe these people could build that siege engine?
See, I just assumed they had it like hanging around the back. It's like, you know, at some point in time, we're going to rise up and I'm going to be ready. Like, this one guy is like going, the second someone says go, I have got a siege engine in my backyard. We can do it. Just tell me when. Like, no, Frank, just, no, seriously, I'm ready to go, man. Just give me a change, please. No, I'm okay, but if we rise up, I got one. No, it's ridiculous.
All I'm saying about that. But
it's ridiculous.
In practice, it was beautiful to watch it and see it happen.
Yes. But I mean, I think it sounds like we're on the same page in the sense of at this point in time, it was just like, sure, whatever, the siege engine. Okay, that's funny. I like that. But I've lost all connection to the film itself.
And to show you how wealthy they were, even I think one of the cattle barons makes, I think, a joke about Rome or Greece or something in my version. Yeah. So it's like, oh my God. So like,
right. And then, okay.
Go ahead.
I was just talking about the army showing up, so it sounds like you want to go before that.
Nope, that's exactly where I want to go. So go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So the army shows up, and it's like, I get the intent of like, literally the cavalry arrives, but it's not for the reasons you think it is. But it's such a fucking kick in the nuts to the thread of this movie.
So I found it fascinating, though, that for someone who makes a historically accurate film, that nay one of those cavalry members of like the 9th Cavalry, who was a black regiment, were black.
Oh damn!
I think it was I think it was the 9th and 10th that they sent in. They sent in the Buffalo Soldiers to help quash all these people.
Right. But like, Avril's like, you know, basically says, "You're just doing this to cover things up," and Kent just goes, "Yep, sure I am," and that's it. Like, there's no follow up to that. There's no one going, "No, actually, seriously, Rich, you're going to arrest these guys?" No, but like, don't. The villain of the film just goes, "Yes, we're going to get away with this," and the movie goes, "Okay." What in the actual fuck?
Well, that is you know what? That is the truest part of this entire movie, Eddie.
I agree, but it is not the movie that's presented to me for the past how many hours we've watched.
Are you sure? We're not there yet, so I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Well, okay.
We got
Fair
one more
enough.
beat.
Later at Watson's cabin, Bridges, Watson, and Averill prepare to leave for good, but Canton and the two others ambush them. Averill and Bridges shoot and kill Canton and one of his men, but both Bridges and Watson are killed. A grief-stricken Averill holds Watson's body in his arms. Finally, in 1903, a well-dressed, beardless but older-looking Averill walks the deck of his yacht off Newport, Rhode Island. He goes below where an attractive middle-aged woman sleeps in a luxurious boudoir. The woman, Averill's old Harvard girlfriend, awakens and asks him for a cigarette. Silently, he complies, lighting the cigarette and returning to the deck. That's it. Now, first thing, this was a flashback, Chris, your favorite thing. Because after that battle scene, we jump to 1903, and then he goes back and reflects on the whole last actual act of the film for no reason.
All he needed to say is it was all a dream, and that would be the end of it. And then I could hear my.
I have, to date, made a lot of fun of you for your hatred of flashbacks. This and Arrow are the only times I was like, no, seriously, there's something to this. What the actual hell is this for? There was no need for that to be a flashback. They could have just had the film keep going.
No idea.
But I see your point, right? Like, it seems like the thread of the movie, now that we're actually here at the end, is actually no rich people are just going to get away with it all. You can maybe kill one or two of them, but at the end of the day, rich people are just going to get away with it or do whatever the hell they want.
Yep. Hands down.
The problem is Averill's one of those rich people who got away and did what he wanted. Right? Now, this is one point where the cuts do make a difference. The whole thing of him going below and his girlfriend being there and having a cigarette is not in my version.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
In my version,
all right.
He's on the yacht. He has a flashback. He goes on the deck and the movie ends. I actually like that better.
You like your version better?
Yes.
So I'm curious. Does Ellen in your version, when she goes and talks to Jim, see the picture that he still has of his old girlfriend from college, nay, like 20 plus years later? Because mine focuses on her looking at that picture in his room when she talks to him.
I think briefly, but not just linger on it at all.
Because one of the few things I will say for continuity wise is that scene and her being in the boat with him in the end establishes continuity for that character. It's very loose and loosey-goosey, but it is there, and that was why I have no problem with my version. If I'd seen your version, I'd probably like your version better. But as I said, first time I saw it, it makes sense in my brain that would have been his trajectory.
No,
because
totally.
Harvard is, I think we're faithfully like in there. Like
yeah, we're basically in there, yeah.
So for me, what that does is it shows Jim as a rich white person who, to quote the film, finger quotes, is civilized, to go into the quote the film uncivilized version, to teach people, is effectively beaten and flees back to the finger quote civilized world on the East Coast with the woman that he left decades ago to regress back to that person. Because even at the start of the movie, he didn't have a beard, and now he's beardless again, even though he's older with really bad old man makeup.
Yes, and to your point, like, so this game, because I had the summary in front of me, I was like, oh shit, this is how the movie ends. It sucks. Because I was the same way. It's like, for Averill, there have been no meaningful consequences. You know, between Harvard and between 1870 and 1903, functionally had zero consequences. And so if the metaphor is rich people can do what they want to and have no consequences, that hangs together, right? I do like the truncated ending for me because it implies that there were consequences for Averill, which is that he left Harvard, he went through all of this, and yes, he's back in, he's in Newport, Rhode Island, he's on a yacht, clearly still well to do, but he's reflecting on all the people he lost in that last chunk of things, and he's alone, right? And so it feels like that war never left him, and so at least there's some consequences for it. It's not much, right? Because I still don't like Avril. I still don't think he's an interesting character. But at least it was like, okay, at least there's someone who got out of this, who felt the consequences of all of this. Because I can't focus on the poor people that got murdered and their lives uprooted, because we don't want to deal with that. I want to focus on the rich people. But like, if that's anything we're going to have, I do kind of like that a bit better.
So the thing is, I haven't come down one way on the movie yet that I'll acknowledge, because we're still recording. But the thing is, we essentially have Avril, who is here as a white American male. He goes off, and all the people that we primarily have killed that we're supposed to care about are all immigrants from another country. So
right.
All of the marginalized people is in this film that would be marginalized, like the lower class people, are killed while the wealthy white man still gets to live. So I think it's trying to talk about trauma at the same time saying that regardless of what you do, capitalism will always win, but I'm not sure.
Right. And I'm with you in that part of the reason why I haven't been forthcoming in my feeling of the films, because I actually didn't know when I started recording how I felt about it. And I don't think I'm any closer to an answer, because I can't judge the movie for its politics purely because it's many years later, and some of that stuff just hits differently. And so in that regard, I don't feel like going, I'm mad that the rich people got away with it, is entirely a valid criticism. I would argue that if the movie came out even a few years after 1980, it would also hit bad, but also the movie tanked terribly. So like, I don't know how much more I can kick it while it's down. In that regard.
Maybe if it come out a couple of years later, it might have done better, because I think people would have been in the full swing of Reaganomics then, right?
Oh, true. Good shout, actually. Maybe that would have done better. Because this is like the tail end of the 70s. So yeah, that's actually a good point. But it's clear the movie's trying to do something, right? And I'm certainly on the side of, this is by no stretch of the imagination the worst film ever made.
No,
it's not even the worst Western we've watched, right? It's
what
not
watchable. Are you about to insult the Valley of Guanji, Eddie?
Okay, Valley of Guanji was terrible, but in a fun way. I enjoyed the Valley of Guanji. I'm looking at Billy the Kid vs. Dracula, my friend.
Oh my god! All right, that was
that was just bad, right?
For me, it was fun because I got to see your face the whole time we talked about it.
Sure, so, but you did not enjoy watching the film. Don't tell me you did. You're a liar.
No hablo inglés.
So yeah, like, is this movie terrible? No. Is this movie the 98th best American movie ever made? Probably not.
I'm in agreement with you. It's not as bad as people say it is at all. Like, and I think my opinion of the movie is probably going to, even though I had to watch a longer version of it, I think my opinion of the movie, regardless of what I've said now, is higher than yours, because I didn't have to see that grainy bullshit that you saw.
Yeah.
Without that, the movie looks great. Like, it has a visual appeal that is striking. There's someone that had a vision. They needed constraints. They needed someone to come in and pull them back. And this could have been possibly the 98th greatest Western movie, according to your thing. But without those constraints, it just ran wild. And this is coming from a person who wrote an 806 book about the Old West. It's not even that it's too much. It's the lack of coherent focus throughout the film. There's a message I feel Cimino wants to tell, but he's trying to trick people with like the grandeur of the Old West to tell his message, but it's not melded or blended or focused enough with that message. It doesn't provide context to people that needed context. If it had an opening scroll to the movie, that might have helped bring people in so they could see where he's going. But just vision-wise alone, it doesn't work, because they don't have whatever it was that he needed them to have at that point in time. It looks like people now have a better understanding of it, but the fact that he had to cut it, the fact that he may have chosen to cut it down to 2.5 hours destroys any chance of anyone understanding it. It's like with how they did David Lynch's Dune to make him shrink it down to fit to that little box window.
Right. And to your point, right, I could see, because I didn't watch it, I can't say, but like I can see an argument for, if it's just visually interesting, that gives it a fair amount of artistic merits, because I had mentioned before, like juxtaposing the mundanity of evil with the spectacle of an epic Western.
Yeah,
it can be a strong tone, and like if you have the bright color visuals with it, maybe that's the answer. Maybe that gets you there, because everything I saw was through a grainy lens. I didn't get that piece of it. I enjoyed when there are lots of extras, when there are big wide shots, those parts of it, but it wasn't consistently epic. And so it felt so much more disjointed to me, I think, as maybe possibly as a result. Because you're right, like it's muddy, it's muddled. I can see now, having watched it, why there would be instinct to make a even more reduced version. But the problem is that there's just enough. The cast is too big, and just enough load-bearing scenes that those cast need to be in, that you can't cut it down to be a tight movie about 3 people. But it's too muddy to have a movie about 6 people.
Well, I will never watch this film again. I would have loved to have seen like the 5-hour version, to see if the 5-hour version had all the context in it that would have expanded out people's stories that he was forced to cut to make the 3.5-hour version to let it be released in the first place.
Yeah. This is one of the few times where I could genuinely be behind a streaming remake that makes this into an 8-episode series.
If only they were willing to put in the amount of work they did here. Like, I can't stress enough how beautiful the sets are that he had them construct. It's a fact that he then had them tear them down and rebuild multi-million-dollar sets on a limited budget that blew it all out, and likely was one of the reasons the studio may have tried to like Canax him after that.
Yeah, I mean, we it's fair. Part of the reason why I think I'm so collected too is because you're right. It's so easy to pick apart the plot problems and whatnot, but like visually, so it's frustrating for me because like visually it is a very interesting movie. The battle scenes are just gorgeous, weirdly, and there's lots of not quite, but almost James Bond levels of spectacle violence, right? Like setting a house on fire or ramming them with a barricade with guns behind it, like just not quite surreal or stupid. But there's interesting things happening in these battle scenes. It's not just guys sitting behind rocks going pew pew pew. There's a lot of dynamism in these fights, and even if he did make an irrigation system with the grass green, like visually, these are very interesting battles in a way that like I was bored stiff of the movie, but I still watched the battles, which is rare for me.
And for me, the thing is that he focused on like inconsequential moments to a nauseating extreme, but no one else has done that. Like no one else is focused on Heaven's Gate, name of the movie, a fucking roller ring with the community together being joyous, that then becomes like a debate point, how it would in the Old West. But that roller skating scene, as long as it was amazing to see someone focus on it and make that an integral part of their movie. Just not the battle scenes, just not the political scene, but like this is a community of people that are trying to live together.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, that's a good point. Like, this is a team that spent just as much time and care about a roller rink as they did about a battle, and that says something about the movie that I can't disagree with. I think maybe where I'm landing is I could see a genuinely classic movie in this, but I don't think any version of this is actually it.
Yeah. So I guess if you had to take this movie and fix it, what would you do? Like you can maybe add, you know what? You can't even add new scenes. If you had this movie itself, how could you fix it to present it?
Jeez. Honestly, I think a decent chunk of the movie would be to reorganize. If you're gonna have a flashback, right? If you're committed to a flashback, start with that tense confrontation in Heaven's Gate and make sure it's clear visually that they're inside a place called Heaven's Gate and they're having this horrible fight. Then more or less tell the story chronologically. Um, that way, when you see Heaven Gate as a roller rink, everyone's happy. You realize, oh, horrible things are on the horizon, right? So you feel pretty early on something bad's going to happen, and it won't. Nothing can stop it. If the movie's going to end on a downbeat, make that downbeat very early on. I mean, let's be honest. Sinners does a great job of this, right? Sinners starts with a mauled guy stumbling into a church, and then the whole movie builds to that point. So it's like it's inevitable how horrible things are going to get. I think this movie could have had that lingering sense of inevitability hanging over it would have really, really, really helped, because otherwise you don't know what the movie's really doing until it's too late.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty close to what I would jump to.
Also, I would have cut the entire bit of him on the yacht. That's just me.
If I was going to keep that, the only bit I would do different is I would shift him on the yacht. Like, I'd even show like her and him on the yacht, him going back up to the ship onto the deck, and then I would show a flashback of the intense speech at the Heaven's Gate.
Oh, and
then go to him to college. So then you just know the entire fucking movie's a flashback. And I would hard cut on the end of when they gunned down Ellen and Bridges. Bam.
Yep. Agreed. Yes. Maybe end with that. Maybe cut to him remembering that in the chair or whatever, but then credits. Whatever. Just kind of close the flashback loop if you wanted to. But otherwise, I agree. I feel like the movie actually ends when she's shot.
Yes. Because then, even though he has like this new wife and everything else, it would establish that he lost his true love and his best friend at that point, 20 years ago, and is forced to keep living.
Honestly, maybe because of the multiple cuts, I keep thinking of Blade Runner, but it does feel a bit like when Blade Runner tried to have a happy ending.
Yeah.
It's like, no, they got off and made it work. And it's like, no, I feel like Blade Runner works really well when he's stepping out the door with the woman, and he's got the gun out, and then the movie just ends. It's like you don't know what happens. I feel like that's very similar to the vibes going on here. Even though Blade Runner's 2 years after this, so that's another weird thing, but whatever.
So in summation, it is not the worst movie ever made. It is a massive flop. I'm curious though if what's that movie with Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman that came out a couple years later that was also a huge flop. Fucking remember the name. Starts with an I though. Damn it. It'll come to me once we stop recording.
Ishtar?
That's it. Like Ishtar was a massive flop. I'm curious if Ishtar's flop is bigger than this flop.
I don't know. Because again, like it's so well known for being a flop.
Though I guess now we could say a bigger flop potentially. Is The Bride a bigger flop than this movie now?
Maybe.
Because they gave The Bride, was it like $80 million or $130 million? And I think it's made like $20 or $30 million now. But anyway, regardless.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen Heaven's Gate and you do want to watch it, I would say watch a 3-hour and 30-minute version, because the cinematography is going to be better.
Yeah.
It'll be slower, but there's enough visuals to keep you engaged mostly.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I wouldn't, as much as you save an hour of your life watching my version. It was just so muddy. Again, I genuinely thought for a long time it was just a bad transfer or something, but it's just how that movie was released, and I could see why people it's just not visually interesting. Which the first time I think we've ever had a conversation about how the color of a movie changes it.
Yeah, but it's true. It does.
It really does. So,
you know
okay,
what?
Chris.
My last thought on this entire movie is I would put this in my Mr. Holmes category. Is I could see why people like it, but it is not a movie made for me.
Wow. Now that just hurts. But that's fair, because I you like Mr. Holmes, but I also recognize it's not a film for everybody. So I could see why people like this movie and maybe want to defend it.
Yeah. But next time we're gonna take a hard cut from these overly deep philosophical movies with like big pertinent messages, and instead we're gonna do Silverado 1985. a lighter movie, but still the 80s, trying to do some Western action.
Yeah. But again, like we talked about, like people say, "Oh, the Western died in the 70s." It's like Silverado was a huge movie. I remember everyone watched it when I was growing up. So
I don't either confirm nor deny.
Well, if people want to talk to you about Silverado or Heaven's Gates or any of these other films, where would they find you online?
You should probably come to the Discord, because that would probably be a more interesting conversation, because I may like or make one random comment if you contact me on Blue Sky at _Hugh. What about you?
Much the same way, if you talk to me in Blue Sky, I would be at pugstudy.com, which is also my website. But definitely do come to Discord. We do. It's not a very busy one, but I think we generally have pretty good conversations there as a result. It's not, relentless either. So when people talk, it's usually a pretty good conversation. So I think it's worth it. Come check it out.
I haven't promoted Discord now probably like over a year on Blue Sky. I guess I should do it again, huh?
It's been a while. Maybe you should. Hey, by the way, here's Discord thing. You should go check that out. Do that now. No. But while you're waiting to join the Discord, you can watch Silverado, and we'll talk about it next time.
Be seeing you.